Hello friends, welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery in Maya Soma, and I'm here with Bhante Sudasa and Bhante Wade, Britannia, who's about to unfortunately leave in a few days, but hopefully will return very soon. So we're here for monk chat, your opportunity to ask any questions about Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha that you might like, and we'll try our best to answer them. So hello to Mary, good to see you. We just saw you in person, good to see you also online. And Karuna, Lydia, Suzanne, Andrew, Victoria, and Christina, and everyone else who's watching and hasn't checked in yet. Nano, good to see you. And Victoria asks, oops. I wear a lotus pendant every day that I've had since the start of my Buddhist studies. It reminds me of the Dhamma every time I see it or hold it, which brings me a lot of joy. Does this break the precept of purification if my intention is otherwise? Any of you venerables would like to address this?
It's a lotus what? I didn't quite catch what.
Pendant.
A pendant.
Pendant.
And so it's and she sees it as a symbol of enlightenment, or it reminds her of enlightenment. I think is that what she said?
It reminds me of the Dhamma every time I see it.
Dhamma. Okay. Dhamma. Wow. So yes. Well, right. So we have a number of symbols in the Buddhist religion, and for example, the wheel is a common symbol, and it is quite possible a pendant could be made of the wheel. In a wheel shape, for example, this is another example of a symbol that could be worn in a way like that. And so personally, I think that it depends on how you relate to it. And if you think of it as a symbol of the Dhamma, then it probably is perfectly all right, in my opinion.
All right. Thank you, Bhante. Do you want to add anything?
Well, so I do think that there's a big distinction to make between jewelry and things that are done just for the sake of adornment versus something which is a religious instrument, a religious equipment, something that supports one's spiritual practice. A very clear example of this is the mala beads, which are commonly used, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, but also many Theravada practitioners use them as well. So that's a form of spiritual equipment. Its purpose is not to beautify or adorn, but rather to aid one's practice. So similarly, it's quite common for people to have Buddha pendants or amulets of with some spiritual significance that helps remind them to stay focused on the path. Including many monks I know. I know many monks who have like a little Buddha amulet that they wear inside their robes, or a little, often it's a little reliquary with like ashes of a dead saint that's been pressed into a little amulet that they again wear inside their robes. Though usually it's not visible from the outside. Like you feel it against your body, but it's not externally visible, because it's meant to be a reminder to yourself rather than something that you're showing off to other people. So I think that's also an indication. So first off, is it something that directly supports the cultivation of wholesome mind states? Then good, no problem. And second, what's the purpose of having it? Is it something that we're wearing to support our own practice, or is it something that we're wearing in order to impress other people? And that also gives you a sense as to what your intention behind wearing it is. Those are my thoughts on the matter.
Okay, thank you. And Ulises Prudencio says, how to live the moment and not let other people take it away? Go ahead, you seem inspired.
Live in the moment, not let other people take it away. How can you be with people and not get so caught up in the moment?
It's question and question instead of question and answer.
That's a good answer.
Anything else?
Well, first off, I would say nobody can take the moment away from you. The present moment is always here. No one can take it away. And if you want to cultivate awareness in the present moment, that's your choice. Nobody else can make that choice for you. Nobody else can prevent you from making that choice. But also in line with what Ajahn Wade was just saying, actually when you're with someone, then being in the present moment means being present with that person, being present for that person. So giving your full loving attention to whoever's in front of you is in fact being in the moment. And it's being in the moment in the most wholesome and appropriate way.
So it's basically how to live in the moment and give it away with kindness and gentleness. And Christina asks, which mind is responsible for the appearance of mindfulness? Is it mano or citta? I'm waiting. I have jet lag, so I'm waiting for my to work on the brightness of mind. For now, I'm just reading the questions.
Which one is responsible for jet lag?
Yeah, which one is responsible for jet lag? That's a very interesting question.
I mean, in some suttas there's not really any distinction made between mano and citta. Where a distinction is made, mano is more directly connected to awareness of mental objects, whereas citta is a broader term that encompasses all mental activities and processes. So if I had to pick one, I would say citta. Yeah, I don't actually see what's really important in knowing which Pali word to label it with, because the important thing is whether or not your mindfulness is present.
Sadhu. It reminds me of an instance where they're not clearly distinguished as like the first two verses of the Dhammapada.
Mm. Yeah.
Thank you, Venerables. And Joram says, am I really under the obligation, thanks that my terminal cancer can let me be too horrid punishment? I don't understand.
I don't quite get what they're asking either.
Yes, Joram, if you can rephrase and maybe without shortening the words, because, well, I am ESL and we're all like the sort of acronyms that are used online. We're all like, it's not our first language. I think we're all like old enough not to have learned that as soon as we were born, so it makes it a little bit difficult to answer that. So I can't see any other questions, so maybe people here have any thoughts or questions they would like to ask. Oh, it's a very short monk chat.
No.
The only way to extend monk chat is to ask
I'm
questions.
cooking it up. I just haven't figured out how much could it be.
It seemed like there were a number of people who signed on and said hello but didn't ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
For any of you who practice mindfulness of the breath as a meditation object, how much or how little do you necessarily bring in whole body awareness into that? When's a good time to really let your mind just focus on the sensation of the breath? When is it beneficial to have full body and seeing the breath rise and fall within full body awareness?
Well, I guess I can answer that since I happen to practice mindfulness of breathing quite a bit. The way that I normally approach that is by, well, following the instructions that we see in the suttas. So first establishing just mindfulness of breathing, just the awareness, establishing mindfulness essentially. and then embracing the inner and outer breathing. So knowing that when the breath is long, the breath is long, and when the breath is short, the breath is short. And then afterwards, when the instruction is basically to train yourself, which is very interesting because up until then it's just knowing, so you're just aware of what is happening. But then you actually train yourself to be aware of that. Obviously, there's many different ways. Usually, people when there's the instruction of being mindful of the body in relation to the breath. There, many teachers give the instruction to pay attention to the sort of actual body of the breath. I never found that particularly useful for myself. I tried to practice in that way, but it would become a little bit sometimes like my mind would start getting very stiff. What I found useful instead was to train myself to actually feel the entire body with every in-breath and out-breath. And from there, then calm the body. So taking the instruction as a literal instruction, as actually, feeling the entire body, but not scanning the body, but rather just feeling the body. And I found it really, really grounding, very, very useful, much easier to then tranquilize the entire body and then start paying attention, embracing the element of pleasure in the body that comes with the tranquility. So the pleasantness and the ease and that pleasure, and actively cultivating it, and then so forth, going through all the other steps. So that's how I normally approach it. And I don't know if it's exactly the intention that the Buddha was giving, because obviously there's many different ways to interpret it, but it definitely is the one that has been working the most for me so far. And I don't know the other venerables if they want to share their approach. Or maybe not. Maybe there's a lot of questions.
Oh, right.
Well, there actually are several questions online, so I think
Okay.
you gave a pretty thorough answer.
Okay.
And we can start looking at these other questions.
And Andrew asks, is there a standard calendar for observation of the Uposatha days, or does this depend on the country or culture? Venerable.
Yes, there is a standard calendar. It's called the moon. So you look at the moon, and when the moon is full, that's an Uposatha day. When the moon is new, that's an Uposatha day. So that's the actual original Uposatha calendar, is look up at the sky and see what phase the moon is in. However, these days, most monks rely on moon calendars, moon phase calendars. And in Buddhist countries, there are often official moon day calendars, which are published by various governmental or semi-governmental organizations. And those are of widely varying accuracy and often conflict with each other. So you might go to 3 different monasteries and they each say the Uposatha is on 3 different days. So it all depends upon which calendar they're following. Here at Empty Cloud Monastery, we go by the official NASA report on moon phases. But other monasteries do other things, and that's okay. There's an interesting bit from the Vinaya where somebody asked, basically the monks had a different date for the Uposatha than what the local government had set. And the Buddha said it was okay to go with either one. Like it was okay to go with the government set calendar instead if that was what made more sense. So I get the sense like the Buddha really didn't care that much exactly what day that we did the Uposatha on. But rather the important thing is that we do set aside these days for spiritual practice, for reminding ourselves of the values that we live by. But it's not so critically important that it be on exactly one particular day of the week or another.
That's something that the meditation masters, I can't speak for all of them, of course, but it seems to be the sense I've gotten from the meditation masters in Thailand that really any day you keep the 8 precepts and set aside for spiritual practice is going to be a very good day. And so the calendar is just a convention, really. So.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. And Amaranta asks, since intentions are important, what can we do when we think something bad and then we realize that that is not correct and think another thing? Is this action having consequences? Yes, very good consequences. You're getting closer and closer to awakening because you're actually following the instructions of the Buddha. That's precisely how one of the instructions that actually the Buddha gives in the Vitakasantana Sutta. So when an evil thought appears, that actually you can redirect your attention towards something more wholesome. And that's a good way to, abandon the unwholesome and cultivate the wholesome. So it's very good. Actually, that means that you're cultivating sharper mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of the Dhammas, mindfulness of the thoughts that appear in your in every moment. And you're also very skillful in having that wisdom to identify, to distinguish, right? Distinguishing the different mind states. So this is wholesome, this is unwholesome, this needs to be pursued, this needs to be not pursued. So keep going, and yeah. And Anissa says, after a certain period of time in meditation, I begin to notice deeply the rising and falling of the chest and slight movements of the body. Is this okay, or should I enforce even more stillness? I will wait.
After a certain period of time in meditation. It doesn't sound problematic. Maybe if I knew more context about what your meditation object is, I guess, it might be easier to answer. I suppose the way to stillness is with mindfulness and awareness, and so if you are mindfully aware of these kinds of things, then it shouldn't really be problematic. But I guess it depends on the context of the meditation, also where you're at in meditation and things like this. The key thing is you say that you notice deeply these things, and so perhaps what you mean by that is you're being mindfully aware, which sounds like a very good thing.
Thank you, Venerable. And Vaibhav says, I'm a long time on again lay practitioner. I'm a bit lost in my practice. I have done Vipassana retreats and mindfulness of breathing. Having a lot of insomnia these days and looking for some tips. Ante Sudaso?
Well, many people complain that they don't have enough time to meditate, but you've just discovered you actually have lots of time to meditate, which is all night long. So if you can't sleep, then take the opportunity to do some meditation practice. And one of two things will happen. Either you can't fall asleep, in which case you do a few hours of meditation, which is great, or you get tired of meditating and you fall asleep, which is also great. So you really can't go wrong with this. Either way you win. I would recommend, though, that you practice metta meditation. So, of course, the various forms of vipassana that are taught these days are fine. There's nothing wrong with them. Mindfulness of breathing also is fine. But there's something about metta that tends to be really soothing to the mind. And actually, the Buddha himself said that one of the benefits of metta is that it's easier to sleep, and your sleep is more enriching, and you don't have nightmares, and you wake up refreshed. So the Buddha actually made a direct connection between the practice of metta and having good, refreshing sleep. So I recommend, when you have insomnia, Do a bunch of metta meditation. And if you start feeling sleepy, then go to sleep. If not, then just keep doing meditation.
I know a man who's practicing basically in line with your advice, actually, and he had reported very good results. Actually, it reminds me of this very pleasant story. His son had a developmental disability, and woke up many times at night, many times, and needed attention. And so the parents would switch off each night, staying, basically being the one on call to go and help the child. And this man told me that on nights when he tries to get sleep in between these challenging periods when the child needed help, he didn't feel as good as when he just decided, well, I'll just stay up all night and do loving kindness meditation, loving kindness recitations. Yeah, he said actually in the morning he felt better if he did the loving kindness instead of trying to get cat naps throughout the night.
Sadhu.
Thank you, Venerables. And Christina asks, how to observe dependent origination and learn from it? Very good question. I would say one of the easiest, which might not be the easiest way, but one of the easiest ways for me is to actually look at the identities that, like who I think I am on a regular basis, and then see how all of these identities are dependently arisen. And then the identities that I don't particularly like, trying to switch, the sort of conditions that create that result, right? So for example, irritable soma. Right? So then noticing what are the conditions that create that irritable soma result. And then going, okay, well, so since the Buddha tells me that anything is not, doesn't belong to me, it's not me, it's not mine, it's not who I am, then irritable soma is just something that is temporary here and it's dependently arisen due to causes and conditions. So instead of focusing on that and going like, oh, it has to be removed, and it keeps on fueling, then become more irritable and more irritable and more irritable, and you're like, this is really who I am, I'm irritable soma, right? Instead, redirecting and going, when these conditions are here, then this is the result. Or when, one cultivates this and that, and then this is the result. So how about, instead of cultivating this and this, I cultivate this and that? Does this create a new result? Like for example, less irritable soma. Wow, that's quite incredible. And what about maybe I switch the ingredient altogether, right? And maybe there's a cultivation of metta. When this other condition is here, then irritable soma disappears, and actually she's quite pleasant to be around with. Like I actually want to hang out with this soma. I don't want to just destroy her anymore. I'm like, actually quite nice, lovely metaphor soma, right? So then we see that in our experience and every day, and we can actually get more and more acquainted, and it becomes something that is less intellectual, less like a philosophical thing that we then talk about with our friends to impress them perhaps about how our religion is so sophisticated. But it becomes something that we can observe in our heart, and something that actually is really helpful to make progress in the path. And Ulysses says, I do not believe in reincarnation. Is there any evidence about it? If someone can explain how reincarnation works. Venerable Wade Budipanya.
Why me? Okay.
Because I actually have never heard your answer to this one.
She's heard my answer about 150 times.
I've also heard my own answer, so even more times. Because even when I don't answer, I have my own answers, so I would like to hear your answer.
Let's see. I don't believe in reincarnation. Is there any evidence about it? Can someone explain how reincarnation works? So, the last question is kind of controversial. Let's see. Is there any evidence? Well, so I've heard about some evidence. There have been people researching stories of children claiming to have memories of previous lives. This is one kind of a field of research now. I don't know how big the field of research is. I remember hearing or reading something. A professor wrote an article in Sri Lanka about this, about a child who remembered past life experience, and they researched it and were able to match up many details from someone who had passed away around the time the child was born. I don't remember exactly the dates and things like this, but and so they'd actually researched a number of these kinds of cases and published articles about it, this professor. And apparently there have been two professors at a university, I think it was, I could be wrong, Virginia or West Virginia?
Virginia.
Virginia. Okay, Virginia. Who compiled quite a number of cases. They've researched, I haven't read their books, but tracked down a number of details and tried to see if they could prove the stories that they heard from children about memories of past lives. And from what I've heard, the results are quite impressive. But I have to admit, I haven't read their books yet. I don't recall their names, and maybe someone else here.
Might be Dr. Ian Stevenson, might be one of the two.
Yes, I think Ian. Yeah, Ian Stevenson. Right, that name rings a bell. So I don't know. There's another book I can speak to a little bit more, and we happen to have it in the library here. It's a book called Rebirth, written by a monk named Analayo. The Venerable Analayo, who's quite highly esteemed as a scholar monk. A number of scholarly books, and he includes, I think it's a discussion of rebirth, if I recall correctly, rebirth in the suttas, the Pali suttas, then also a particular case study of a child who could chant at a very young age, even though he hadn't been taught how to chant suttas. He could do this. And so he researches this case, presents a lot of evidence related to it. And then if I understood correctly, he includes a summary of Ian Stevenson's work and another professor's work, talking about the details of cases that they found. So as you can tell, I'm not a very good source for information about evidence, but except that there is this field that's emerged of people studying this and tracking out cases, and then the evidence from them, going back and trying to verify memories, seeing if they can verify memories that these children have. And apparently people find it, who read these, find it very compelling. So let's see here. So is there any evidence? So we have a teaching from the Buddha about this, and a teaching, there are many teachings of the Buddha on reincarnation and rebirth, but one that I like quite a bit, and perhaps is germane to this situation, your question, and also similar to what some meditation masters in Thailand would say. I ordained in Thailand in a meditation lineage, and so on, one of my reference points also. But one thing the meditation masters would say, well, you don't know, but if you practice, you'll be able to find out if reincarnation is real, if rebirth is real. And we have something in the suttas. There's a sutta called the Kalama Sutta. So a scripture, they say comes from the Buddha teaching a group of people, and he says to them, well, you don't know if there is a next life or not, he says. But if you live a good life, if you live in a moral way in this life, you'll see that protects you from any dangers. And if there is a next life, and there are the consequences of good and bad actions that come to us in future lives, then you'll be protected that way as well. And so acknowledging that most of us don't know if there'll be a next life, but we can see right here the benefits of living properly and living well. And this will protect us in the future in case there is a future life as well. So, a very pragmatic kind of solution to the question, I think.
Excellent. Thank you, Bante. And Mark says, would it be considered good practice to move from mindfulness of the breath to silent illumination, then back to mindfulness of the breath when too many thoughts arise? Venerable Sutaso?
Well, Rather than give a strict yes or no answer, rather I would say that the important thing is to watch the results. When you do something, are wholesome mind states increasing and unwholesome mind states decreasing? In the context of meditation practice, for example, are you getting more mindfulness, concentration, and equanimity, or less? So if switching from mindfulness of breathing to silent illumination and then back to mindfulness of breathing, if that gets good results, meaning stronger mindfulness, stronger concentration, stronger equanimity, then good, it's working. On the other hand, if switching back and forth like that makes the mind more scattered or distracted or confused or spacey, then it's not working, and you should probably try to stick with one thing for longer. So the important thing is not so much what you're doing, but rather, what are the effects of what you're doing? So that's our constant investigation, is always investigating what are the effects of what we're doing. And are those effects wholesome or unwholesome, good or bad?
Bante. And Mark, actually, this is a public service announcement in regards to Venerable Wade's answer on rebirth. He says the University of Virginia has a department called Division of Perceptual Studies, which has done extensive research, especially on children, over 2,500, and written many books on this topic. Wow, I did not know that. There were 2,500 children that were studied on
It's the topic of rebirth and past life stories from children. Okay, yes.
Yeah. And there's like an actual department that has done extensive research on
Right.
the subject.
Yes. There you go. Published many books. Apparently.
Yeah. And I have to say that lately I was thinking a lot, not really about rebirth per se, but our perception of rebirth and the questions that we ask ourselves these days, especially after spending so much time in the forest in Italy. I was like, wow, I mean, no wonder how before people were actually not questioning, really, except for the kalamas, a few people here and there. But it doesn't seem like it was this obsession that we have like these days. Everybody's like, oh, where's the proof for rebirth? And then we have like these, departments at universities that study rebirth. It doesn't seem like for millennia this was at the forefront of like people's minds, whether it was rebirth or like in terms of samsara, like multiple, countless rebirths, or even just like being reborn somewhere. Like just being reborn, that there was something more than YOLO, that you only live once. And as I was in the forest, after a while, like you start shifting your attitude, because it's not, your perception of reality is not anymore this perception right here of solidity, fake solidity, but still like very credible, like very, very solid. All this stuff is very solid because we're constantly in these like buildings that are solid. But then you go in nature and everything is so free flowing, and there's constant death and like decay and stuff transforming into something else and sentient beings. Like you're constantly experiencing rebirth in one way or the other. So then your mind starts experientially going, wow, just actually YOLO, you only live once, is really, really bizarre. And so the proof then, without even getting into states of meditation, like very sophisticated, just talking about the experience of an everyday person, like a farmer, being more in touch with this. And the farming that is with the hands, not with the industrial machines and spraying and like being more kind of on Mars than actually on the earth, working the earth. But being a farmer, like maybe with permaculture and everything, you're constantly having this experience. So I feel like maybe we should also get a little bit more outside of these containers, and maybe we can have a little bit more of that affinity.
Yeah, I think I think that in modern culture also we're not really very in touch with ourselves. This is, I think, a great point you're bringing up, that the experience of nature is one of constant renewal, death and birth, and but people aren't so much in touch with themselves either in modern culture, industrial culture, and so on like this. It's if you make the heart calm, if you make the mind calm, and get in touch with what's inside, then the idea that all we are is flesh and blood start to seem very strange. It seems to deny some very obvious things that are going on inside of us. So I remember talking the other day with someone here in the monastery upstairs in the meditation hall. We were talking about the movie screen on the inside of our foreheads, and a lot of people take this for granted, that they have this whole inner world, like all the images that they see and so on. But how many stop to ask, ask themselves about this, where are these images? And obviously there's no movie screen on the inside of our forehead. And this is a simple way of putting it, a kind of a simple example to call out. How does all this happen, this inner world? And if you make the mind calm, I think in meditation, and you get in touch with what's inside, then you get a sense that there's more to us than just meat.
Thank you, Venerable. And John says, how should we forgive those who hurt us? How does the principle of forgiveness apply to those who might break laws in our society? Well, I actually think that this is very connected to what Venerable Wade was just addressing, obviously in a little bit of a different angle. But I feel like the more we get in touch with ourselves, the more we get in touch with our ignorance, actually. And we start seeing how we're constantly hurting people all the time, without wanting to even. And how we're also hurt by others that are clearly having different intentions than the ones that we were, fabricating that they had sometimes. So it's like this inner work that gets us more in touch also with others, aside from ourselves. So we see our ignorance, and we see more the ignorance of others. We see this constant trying to be happy and getting it wrong, right? Like just getting it all wrong. We're like, okay, I'm sure this is going to make me happy, and it doesn't. And and we hurt ourselves, and we hurt also other people. And so then we start seeing the naturality of it, the normality of it. And then we start practicing the Dhamma, and we start going against the stream of our rational inclinations, or thinking, instead of accumulating all of this in order to be happy, maybe I'll relinquish all of this and I will be happy. It sounds like very bizarre, completely counterintuitive. Not sure it's going to work, but oh wow, there's some relief from suffering. Oh, that's great. That's incredible. But we remember the time when we were so much more full of ignorance that we really thought that the accumulation was going to make us happy, and we pursued it. We had a lot of stuff accumulated, like a whole house, maybe multiple houses or whatever, multiple imaginary houses also in our minds, full of so non-material stuff. Just a lot of experiences, a lot of crap, right? And then we start downsizing and let it all go, and there's a little bit more of a release. And all of this makes us, I feel like, more compassionate towards others. We understand how difficult it is to practice the Dhamma, to even understand the Dhamma, to even take it as a working hypothesis, let alone to practice it, and how natural and spontaneous it is to instead be completely ignorant all the time and act upon our ignorance and be very hurtful. So then it's not something to forgive. It doesn't become this act of like, now I'm a good Buddhist, I should forgive, or I'm a good Christian, or whatever you fill in the dots, I'm a good atheist. I should forgive this person. But rather it comes from that wisdom. It comes from that knowing. It comes from knowing our own ignorance once again. Going like, yes, of course, yes, you're just as ignorant as I am. Why would I expect you to do anything else? than that. So then we're surprised by the things that are actually really surprising, like when people act, in accordance with Dhamma. That is surprising. That is inspiring. That is beautiful. And and then we don't need to forgive. We just understand, and we're there. And so people who break the laws, well, I have to say that breaking the laws, it really depends on the time and place. It's not that the laws. So we're talking about the law of Dhamma now. That Dhamma, that law, I'm on board with. But the law, in terms of the law, there are certain laws that are in line with Dhamma, and some other laws that are really not in line with Dhamma. For example, obviously, there's in the history, it was legal to discriminate on many different people, many different folks. Like in the United States of America for centuries, it was legal to oppress African Americans, right? It was legal to have slaves. So breaking that law, yeah, please break that law. So yeah, forgiveness applying, I guess maybe I'll try to address it. Forgiveness applied to those who might break laws in our society. So laws that maybe are like stealing or whatnot. Well, then it still applies in terms of compassion, in terms of in terms of anukampa, like rocking together. Yeah, like we're all unstable here in this samsara, so we understand that it's just precarious. It's a precarious situation, so we understand our precarious situation, and we understand the precarious situation of others. I don't know if the other venerables have other thoughts.
That's good.
Okay. And Venerable Sutta. So how should the perception of impermanence be practiced so that it produces supreme merit? See the sutta on the ladder of merit. Oh, I like this. This is great.
Well, the purpose of cultivating the recognition of impermanence is that it leads to relinquishment. It leads to renunciation. So that is, in fact, the supreme merit. The supreme merit is the relinquishment of all things, and above all else, the relinquishment of self-identity, of self-centeredness, self-attachment. So that's how it leads to the supreme merit. So it's also, this is something in wording a bit. So perception of impermanence, recognition of impermanence. What we're doing is we're recognizing the way things already are. So it's not like reality is made up of persistent objects and we're superimposing the perception of impermanence on top of that. But rather it's that reality is already made up of non-persistent things. There's nothing whatsoever that persists for even one moment. So we're just recognizing the reality that's already there, which is that absolutely nothing has any persistence at all. Nothing has any ongoing reality at all. We're just recognizing that fundamental truth. And it's recognizing that whatever we think of as me or mine is also non-persistent, insubstantial, and therefore is ultimately impossible to hold on to, and cannot possibly be our true nature. Therefore, we relinquish it, we drop it, because we recognize that we actually can't do anything else. We can't do anything other than relinquish. We can't do anything other than let go. We recognize that holding on is completely impossible because there's nothing we can hold on to. That is how the perception of impermanence is practiced so that it produces supreme merit. But yeah, it's critical to recognize that this applies to literally absolutely everything. Absolutely everything is insubstantial and non-persistent, without any exceptions.
Thank you, Venerable. And Bhai Bhava was also asking, for overall practice, would you recommend mindfulness of breathing or just sitting, silent illumination? I think it was in relation to the question that you had answered earlier.
Well, again, it depends upon results. So silent illumination is a very subtle and difficult practice. And a lot of people who think they're doing silent illumination are actually not. They're either doing some other form of meditation, or they're wasting time quite often. Or they're spacing out, which also isn't of any real benefit. So silent illumination is a great practice when it's done correctly. You really need to look at your own mind and look at your own practice and see for yourself which one is of more benefit to you at this time. Or maybe a different meditation method altogether might be more beneficial. So maybe it's time to start learning other methods and experimenting with other methods and seeing how those affect your mind. And then start to choose, like, what's going to be of benefit to you in any particular occasion.
Excellent, thank you. And Vaibhav also asks, what are contemporary books on meditation you would recommend? Well, I think there's a book from Bhante Ananyo that is precisely on how the Buddha meditated. So I would, I can't remember the exact title, meditation through, like, in the life of the Buddha, basically from the suttas. So it goes step by step, essentially how the Buddha was meditating. So I would, maybe it's not contemporary, contemporary to the Buddha. Do you have any contemporary books on meditation?
How recent does it have to be contemporary?
Well, I guess it's contemporary in the way that Bhante Ananyo is contemporary to us, but the material is not exactly contemporary.
Right, yes, I can see what that, yeah.
Last 100 years.
Last 100 years,
okay,
I guess, for
yes.
Buddhists.
It's very recent on Buddhist standards, right? So maybe the one of the very first meditation books I used was a really wonderful book called Practical Insight Meditation, written by the Mahasi Sayadaw, Burmese meditation master. And I thought it was really wonderful practice. Very, very concise, very straightforward, very simple, but also very effective. And so it's one that I can recommend. The book that I haven't read is Bhante Gunaratana's Mindfulness in Plain English, which is one of the most loved books on meditation published in recent decades. So it's maybe worth looking into, Mindfulness in Plain English. I have to admit I haven't read it myself. Unfortunately, there's so many books about meditation.
Yeah, I think that Bhante Ananyo's book is a meditative life of the Buddha, if I remember correctly. And Bhante Suddhasa, do you recommend anything?
I mostly don't read contemporary books, so I'm not the best source for this sort of thing.
Okay, and Vanessa asks, are there any suttas that have been particularly helpful for your practice over the course of monkhood, or perhaps lesser known ones that have particularly stood out to you? Thank you. Well, if you follow our channel, I think each one of us constantly quotes different suttas and constantly says, this is my favorite sutta. Which sometimes I'm like, maybe I'm breaching the precept of not lying. It can't be materially possible that but whenever I say it, I feel like it's true. So I'm not intentionally lying. But then it can be a little bit challenging to answer this question, because they really depend. They're all helpful. I feel like it's helpful actually to go back to reading the suttas over and over again. 'Cause it's almost always like the first time, in the way that it's actually literally the first time when one is reading it, in the sense that there's a new sentient being, basically. There's a new new conditions, so then there's more maturity, more understanding of of the Dhamma, more understanding of oneself, and so the instructions sink more deeply, and they're just very useful. But I remember starting this journey by reading In the Buddha's Words from Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, that created this anthology of the suttas, and that was the first book that I read cover to cover in less than a week, and it made a huge difference on myself, in particular because this was actually when I was still a layperson, in particular because I was always the uninstructed worldling of the story. It was a big slap in the face of my ego, because I was like the uninstructed worldling, and this like conceit of superiority. Of course it's not talking about me, and then I was like, acts in this way, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, that's how I act. I'm like, but the noble disciple, and I'm like, I probably act in this way. I'm like, wait, no, it's the opposite of how I'm supposed to act. And then like, okay, this sutta is weird. And then the second one I was always the uninstructed worldling who was suffering all the time. And it really got me thinking. I was like, okay, I think I'm getting this wrong. So that was the first breakthrough that then really made me passionate about the suttas and made me approach practice in a different way. And it was all thanks to Bhante Sudasa that I actually started reading that book, or the suttas in general, because he was putting so much emphasis on it. So Sadhu Anumodana, he makes a lot of merit all the time just by telling people to read suttas. And Venerables, do you have particular sutta that is your favorite?
I mean, the first answer that comes to mind for me is to just read all the suttas cover to cover. Like, honestly, that's the absolute best advice I can give regarding any question like this. Just read all of them cover to cover. Because I tend to relate to the suttas not as individual texts, but rather as components of an overall whole. So like the Sutta Pitaka as a whole is a complete document. And particularly I'm talking about the Buddha Vajrayana works, so the four main Nikayas and the four short collections. It forms a single, complete text. And so any particular sutta is more like a phrase within this vast overarching text. So my favorite sutta is, in fact, all of them, because all of them work together and fit together and clarify each other. But if I have to pick just one, the one that comes to mind is the Sabbasava Sutta. Sabbasava Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 2. That's one which, if I had to pick one sutta in the entire canon, that's the one that I would probably pick.
Thank you, Bhante. And Venerable Wade, do you have a favorite sutta?
Well, so this person is asking about suttas that helped us in our practice as monks. And and so if we look at it that way, yes, it would also be hard to single out individual suttas. And in the term practice, also I wonder a little bit about. We talk the monk's practice is the practice is the training in heightened morality and heightened mind, meaning related to concentration, and heightened wisdom. And so it includes, for example, a study of our precepts and the appropriate behavior for monks and so on. I don't know if that would be how much interest that would be for a layperson to hear about. I'll just give you one kind of an example. Not to be too pedantic, but so it would be hard to pick out one sutta in particular, because the monkhood is a whole life, and so we talk about our practice as monks. It's kind of like asking what is the one sutta that's been most helpful to you for how to live life, and of course it's going to be something that's kind of fuller than that than one sutta. But maybe one kind of answer I can give is, I'll give two kinds of answers. One kind of answer is that it's been said that each one of the Nikayas and the suttas fulfills or was designed to fulfill a specific purpose. And I can't say that I know that this is true, but having read the reasoning and some of the evidence for it and reflected on it, I think it seems reasonable, like quite possible. And this is that the Digha Nikaya, the collection of long discourses, was aimed at converting people from other religions or who didn't have a religion to Buddhism. And that the second Nikaya, the Majjhima Nikaya, served as a basic education for monastics. And that the Samyutta Nikaya served as a more detailed and deeper philosophical training. And that the Anguttara Nikaya was quite more of a miscellaneous collection with many wonderful things in it. So miscellaneous, not in the sense of not useful, but actually very useful. One of the suttas that I found very helpful when I was a layperson was the sutta that describes in most detail, of all the ones that I found anyway, the Uposita practice, the holy day practice for lay people, the Uposita Sutta. Also the Kalama Sutta, which I quoted earlier, one of my favorite suttas, is in the Anguttara Nikaya as well. But the Anguttara Nikaya also, another thing about it is that it seems to have the highest percentage of suttas that are aimed specifically at lay people, with practical advice about how to live as a lay Buddhist also. And so if one's interested in kind of the education of a monastic, then maybe if you look at the Majjhima Nikaya, you find a tremendously rich collection of suttas with a wide range of different kinds of things related to the education of a monastic, as I said, including meditation and so on, and philosophy and these kinds of things. And some about the gradual training that monastics go through in the training in heightened virtue and heightened mind, meaning kind of concentration and heightened wisdom as well. Okay, we'll leave it there.
Great, thank you, Bante. And good to see Bante Ganaratna online. Thank you, Venerable, for the kind message.
Venerable who, sorry?
Ganaratna.
Oh, okay, don't know, but welcome.
And Jay says, it occurred to me that being angry or upset at anything or anybody is, at its essence, just my frustration at the absence of an absolute right in this deluded world. Is this a skillful way to think?
No.
Would you like to elaborate?
So Buddhism does not teach moral relativism. So this idea that there's no such thing as an absolute right, that actually is not a Buddhist concept. Generosity is good, stealing is bad. Helping people is good, hurting people is bad. Taking care of others is good, killing sentient beings is bad. There are moral absolutes. There is also a tremendous gray zone, and a lot of what we do in life is in fact somewhere in that gray zone of mixed good and bad intentions, or good intentions combined with a huge amount of delusion, or bad intentions mixed with a huge amount of delusion, or gray intentions mixed with a huge amount of delusion, or thinking that we're doing something for the right reasons, but actually we're motivated more by greed than by good reasons, or things of that sort. So it's there are in fact things which are objectively good and things which are objectively evil. And it's our personal responsibility to keep careful watch over our own mind and to really carefully examine our actual intentions behind anything that we do, every single choice that we make in every single moment. And it's also our personal responsibility to try to expand our understanding of the real consequences of the choices that we make, so that we're able to make better choices that cause less harm and do more good. That said, being angry or upset at anything or anybody, well, it's more a manifestation of the defilement of aversion, of ill will. So it indicates also to some degree a difficulty in accepting the reality of things. So when somebody else does something that we don't like, well, they're making their own choices based upon their own state of mind, which is probably delusional. So there's not really much we can do except to accept and forgive and do our best to make good choices for ourselves. Moral choices within our own sphere of influence, within our own domain of choice. But what other people do, well, we wish the best for them, we cultivate compassion towards them, we accept that they're acting according to what they think is the right way to act, even if we think they're completely delusional, which realistically they probably are. But then also we, ourselves, often have an incomplete or unclear perception of things. So we should also question whether we really are accurately evaluating other people's choices. It's not always clear why other people do what they do. The only thing we can actually cultivate clarity around is why we do what we do ourselves. And to try to cultivate purity of intention within ourselves, in the sense of intentions which are purely wholesome, purely kind, purely compassionate, purely wise, purely peaceful. And when we do that, then we also recognize that cultivating anger is an objectively bad choice, an objectively evil choice, objectively harmful choice. And therefore, we will choose not to cultivate anger. So those are a few thoughts on this.
Thank you. And Dreamy Pieces says, if we're all one, then why would I need to reincarnate as separate soul again? If I'm already experiencing everything as part of the collective, and it's all happening at once, what's the point? Venerable Wayne?
If we are all one, then why would I need to? Okay. Okay. Well, it'd be a very, very good question, I think. If we are all one. I think one thing that we become recipient of more over time as we practice, at least for some of us, not for everybody, of course. Some people have kind of an innate sense of this, and people have different degrees of sense of this. Is that the interconnectedness between all people and all creatures, we have here on Earth, and that our actions have influence with other people that are around us, and even our emotions, even before they take action sometimes, or it comes forth in speech, and have an impact on other people, and of course they on us. And so it's if we look at the Buddhist teachings, he has teachings about what we sometimes refer to as good or bad, or good or evil, and so on like this. But some other terms we use sometimes are things like skillful and unskillful. And he's teaching about what leads to suffering, both for ourselves and for other people, and what leads to pleasure and happiness for ourselves and for others. And if we can grow in mindfulness and circumspection about how interconnected we are with others, and what kind of influence we have with other people, and also what kind of influence they have with us, and then how we can grow to have greater and greater command over ourselves, and actually be independent in skillfulness in relation to other people. And this is really to our tremendous benefit. We're really quite interconnected, but ideally we hope to become eventually much more independent in a very skillful way. Not shunning other people or anything like that, not trying to avoid other people, but in the midst of everything and the connection we have with everyone, that we have this kind of stable, the stability inside, so we're not shaken by them so much. And by the events outside of us as well, not just the people and other beings, but also the events of life, externally and internally. There's a story that comes to mind. It's only I think it's pretty well related. Relating this to the Thai meditation master Ajahn Chah once gave a teaching. It was one of his monk disciples, a relatively new monk. He used to get to the meditation hall early for the evening chanting and meditation, and so the reason he got there early was so that he could find a spot where he could lean against a column in the meditation hall. And so he could lean against this column because the chanting and meditation sessions were quite long, and so his back would get sore sometimes. This is relatively common. He used to sit on granite floor without cushions, and have to sit upright for these long periods of chanting and meditation. He'd find where he could lean against a column, and this went on night after night until once in a Dhamma talk. Ajahn Chah looked at him straight at him and says, the point of Buddhism is to learn how to become independent and not depend on other things. So the monk got the message, that if we expand on it a bit, that if we have a physical body, that we're bound to experience old age and illness, including discomfort, and eventually death. And even though we may want pleasure, that we will experience sometimes suffering. It becomes part and parcel of having a body. If we can train the heart so that it can dwell within this body without being shaken by it emotionally, by the difficulties of the body, and really fully understand the body and all the other constituents of existence, as interconnected as we are to all beings, if it can understand completely, then it can let go. And if it lets go completely, then it doesn't have to be reborn anymore. It doesn't have to take up a body again, and the heart can go to Nibbana. Perhaps this is one way of understanding it.
Excellent, thank you, Ajahn. And Joe asks, the Sanidana Sutta explains how perceptions arise with a cause. How does one train to identify the elements that give rise to perceptions like sensuality, renunciation, or ill will?
Then he gives some quotes from the Sutta, which I think are useful to illuminate the answer.
Do you want me to highlight them?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, one of them is good. So, Joe, I'm just looking at the quote here, kama datum paticca upajjati kama sanya. So the way that I would understand that is first to understand the word dhatu. So it's commonly translated as element. But what dhatu particularly means is it means a fundamental component of reality. So a basic building block of reality. That's what a dhatu is. So kama dhatu, paticca, so when or because there is sensuality as one of the fundamental building blocks of reality, upajjati kama sanya, then sensual perceptions can arise. So this is more pointing to the fact that there is sensuality in the universe. Sensuality is one of the basic things that reality is built of. Therefore, it's possible for us to have sensual perceptions. However, what we choose to direct the mind towards determines what kind of experience the mind has. So, yes, sensuality is a basic aspect of reality. Also, renunciation is a basic aspect of reality. Contentment is a basic aspect of reality. Equanimity is a basic aspect of reality. So, which one are we going to choose to direct the mind towards? Or the other examples you gave, so vyapada datung and vihingsa datung. So, ill will or aversion or contempt is a basic building block of reality. That's part of samsara. But also part of samsara are things like contentment, kindness, compassion, serenity. So what are we going to direct the mind towards? What are we going to choose to point the mind towards? So Buddhist practice is not about trying to change the fundamental nature of reality, but rather it's about directing the mind towards those aspects of reality which support the cultivation of wholesome mind states. An example of this actually is in one of the discourses on dealing with the 5 hindrances. When dealing with agitation, the Buddha's recommendation was to focus on the element of tranquility. So, in other words, he's saying that tranquility is something which is always present. It's just a matter of whether or not we pay attention to it. And when we pay attention to it, then our mind naturally starts to come into alignment with that, and therefore becomes more tranquil. So it's the same. If you focus on the sensual aspects of reality, then your mind will become more in tune with sensuality. Whereas if you focus on the contentment aspect of reality, the relinquishment aspect of reality, the equanimity aspect of reality, then the mind will come into affinity with that. The mind will start to harmonize with that. The mind will naturally start to act in accordance with that. So that's what I understand the Buddha talking about in this discourse.
Thank you, Bhante. And John Wade, Bhante Gyanaratna asks, what's the difference between samatha and vipassana?
Between samatha and vipassana. When Dami Bhante, I haven't had the honor of meeting, and so I apologize, don't know you yet. And don't know really if I'm a bit embarrassed to be answering a question. You may be much more well practiced than I am and more learned, and then I don't know what so I'm not really sure where to begin. So I apologize, but yes. So the difference between samatha and vipassana. Samatha is commonly understood, if I understand correctly, to be calm. In vipassana, typically translated into English as insight, but perhaps also could be translated as something like investigation. And according to Orthodox Theravadan Buddhism, if I understand correctly, samatha is properly accomplished once one is in jhana, especially having reached the 4th jhana. And once one has reached the 4th jhana, the mind is calm and concentrated. Then one can investigate the 3 characteristics of conditioned phenomena with whatever sense objects one is practicing. The 3 conditions being the three marks, I should say, of conditioned phenomena being impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self.
Thank you. And Harinado says, there is no thinking or thought processes in the pure energy state of mind. Witness protection.
Oh.
What is Sara?
That's a reference to a previous comment that somebody made.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The jet lag is severe. I apologize for that, but it's very late right now in Italy, so I'm adjusting to the time here. And Tinri says, unfortunately, I'm having aversion towards the Buddha because I'm no longer finding pleasure in worldly things. And I'm happier learning the Dhamma. Then why are you having aversion? How do I shift this perception and accept what makes me happier? I don't understand. Shift the perception of the aversion, or
I think maybe disliking the Buddha because she no longer finds pleasure in worldly things, and that's so where she.
Well, it's not the Buddha's fault.
But I would say that it is actually a little bit normal not to dislike the Buddha. Actually, that's on. It is normal with, at least that has happened to me, and I've heard many practitioners going through similar phases at one point or the other, that with the practice of Dhamma, we get into, before we start really practicing seriously, we're very much wrapped up, in sensuality. That's our only sort of definition of pleasure, right? Like there's this dukkha, and how do I deal with this dukkha? I'm completely clueless. Ice cream, or or if we're sophisticated, classical music, right? Or reading, this book. If we're sophisticated, or if we're less sophisticated, playing a video game. Now, people who play video games are probably going to say, "Oh, I guess I'm not." It's also very sophisticated, right? So we have all sorts of ways of excusing and describing what is basically just sensuality, our only thing that we know to get out of this experience, universal experience of dukkha. Then the Buddha comes along. We realize we are the uninstructed worldling, and we're like, okay, let me see if I can become a little bit like a disciple of the noble ones. So we start doing this practice, and it can be a little bit difficult at first, but then we stick with it, and all of a sudden, we haven't experienced a different kind of pleasure yet, but this pleasure, what we thought was the, reliable pleasure of sensuality, is not reliable anymore. Or I'm experiencing dukkha. Okay, I go and have the ice cream. Actually, this ice cream sucks. I go and play music. Ugh, it's actually not really that great. I go with the video game. It's really, do I want to waste my life playing video games? Or classical music, whatever it is. It's all unsatisfying. So then we're like, wow, this Buddhism is destroying me. I was already kind of depressed before, but at least there were these things that I was relying upon, and now even those are not available. Wow, this is horrible. Okay, so the answer is stick to it. Just keep. This is a practice of faith. Just go, okay, let me just stick with the practice of Dhamma, and then at a certain point, we will have a little bit of taste of a different escape, which is not, different way out of suffering, which is not sensuality. And then once we have that little taste, we're like, wow, this is true. This taste of relinquishment, there's some cessation of suffering. And then we get, we get into it, and we're like, oh, finally, actually, thank goodness I don't need ice cream in order to be happy. Because that happiness actually was very, very inconsistent, very fragile. At best, it lasted for a couple of seconds at best. But actually, when we look even more deeply into it, it wasn't even there, right? If there was any happiness, it was actually because the moment we pursued that desire for ice cream, right? And we got the ice cream. Then in that moment when we got the ice cream, we don't have the desire anymore for ice cream because we got it already. So then we think that the ice cream made us happy, but it's actually relinquishing the desire for ice cream to begin with. So we become smarter and wiser, and then there's more happiness and more happiness and more happiness. So in this process, don't have aversion towards the Buddha. Actually recollect to a lot of the Tipiso, recollect the magnificent qualities of the Buddha, then the magnificent qualities of the Dhamma, and then magnificent qualities of the Sangha, and just keep practicing. And then at a certain point, you'll just find it. It's kind of like there's directions everywhere. If we keep following the direction to New York City, we'll end up in New York City, right? So it's keep going. Mana says, One would think feeling grateful for something significant will result in joy, but I seem to always end up with tears. I know this is partly why I become emotional contemplating the death of a loved one. How can I maintain equanimity here? Venerable Wayne?
Okay. Hello, Manal. I'm sorry to hear about this situation. I want to read through the question again and take a moment to read through it again, make sure I understand it. One would think feeling grateful for something significant will result in joy. Is this right?
Yes.
Sorry, that's okay. But I seem to always end up with tears. Okay. I know this is partly why I become emotional contemplating the death of a loved one. How can I maintain equanimity here? Okay. Well, so in regard to the first part, one would think feeling grateful for something significant will result in joy, but I seem to always end up with tears. And you're mentioning at the end about the death of a loved one, and so I'm guessing that you're feeling grateful for something significant that someone who's passed away has done for you, perhaps. And while you might expect that this would bring you joy, remembering what they've done for you, you end up crying instead. This is why I become emotional contemplating the death of a loved one. Yes, so right, Manal, I'm sorry. It's hard when we lose someone who's close to us. Of course, we see in the first noble truth, this noble truth of suffering from the Buddha, that death is suffering. This is one of the forms of suffering the Buddha points out explicitly. And our own death is suffering, of course, but so is the death of loved ones. And we see that it comes up also in the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. The Buddha recommended for all people, both lay and ordained, that everything that is dear and pleasing to me will change and be separated from me. And we know this intellectually, even since we're very small. But the heart doesn't really know it. And that's why when we come face to face with it, and the heart has the experience of it, instead of simply us having the intellectual knowledge of it, that the heart initiates a number of emotions, including surprise. You're experiencing surprise here with relation to this aspect of this. And surprise and sadness. And I think a way to try to maintain equanimity is to reflect in various ways on wisdom aspects of the situation, such as the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, and coming to recognize that this is a natural occurrence in life. It's a normal occurrence in life that was always going to happen. We are subject to old age, we are subject to disease, we are subject to death, and we're subject to losing all that we hold dear. Of course, we also are the owners of our action. We're the owners of our karma, as they say in the Pali, the karma. And this can be a very bright thing also. So we can look at this, at the positive aspect of this, that if we do good karma, that will bring good things to us in life, but also will grow internally. And one way we can grow is in wisdom, and these kinds of recollections themselves are a very good form of karma. Another way of developing an equanimity is to practice with meditation subjects that help the mind become calm. Meditation objects you practice with that help the mind become calm. One that's very good for dealing with sadness would be loving kindness meditation. And also it's a close friend compassion meditation. So may I be happy for loving kindness, and for compassion, may I be free of suffering. I did some meditation like that this morning on the live stream, with some loving kindness chanting, and then a guided loving kindness meditation that segued into compassion. And so perhaps you might find it helpful to look that up on the YouTube channel. There have been also some other guided meditations like that, but this morning is one I can remember specifically. And once we make the heart calm, actually, perhaps through a practice like the guided meditation we did this morning with the loving kindness chanting, that then if we do also wisdom contemplations like the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, they'll sink in much more deeply. And in this way we can build our wisdom parami and come to really understand that what's happened is a natural occurrence in life. Is as natural as any other thing that happens. And of course, over time, as we say, time heals all wounds. And over time, the heart naturally gains more and more peace with it as well. And then we can look back at things like the wonderful things that our loved ones did for us before they passed on, and experience more joyful aspects of them as well.
Thank you, Bhante. And Norma says, did the Buddha say anything regarding keeping and dividing someone's ashes and keep them around? I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Maybe yes.
I didn't want to say. I wanted to. Sorry, I was slow. I realized I had something else I wanted to say to Manal.
Oh,
But not on that topic, which is they were asking about in Manal and Ashish. We're asking about asking a little bit of Dhamma the other day while they were here at Empty Cloud. And one thing I missed saying that I wish I said at the time was that I think Ashish, hopefully Ashish will take the opportunity now while he has it to try practicing the religious observance day at least a few times. And so set aside a day that came up earlier in the monk chat, the Uposita day. Set aside a day here and there to do the 8 precepts and to devote the day to spiritual practice while you have this wonderful opportunity. So I want to get that.
Thank you. And Karuna says, a monastic told me we're not supposed to read suttas in bed. What is the reason? Also, is there anything wrong to listening to teachings if we're heavily medicated?
Well, I mean, you should probably ask that particular monastic why they said it, because all we can do is speculate as to why they might have said it. But one reason why, I have heard a number of different teachers in different monasteries often have particular rules or recommendations when studying the suttas or listening to Dhamma talks. And these are often they're related to physical posture, things which are designed to cultivate a respectful and attentive attitude of mind. So that's probably what this is about. It's probably encouraging one to develop a respectful attitude towards the suttas while studying them. That said, I don't agree with this at all. I think that you should read suttas all day long in any posture. You can read suttas standing on your head for all I care. You can read suttas while doing yoga. You can read suttas while jogging. I don't care. Just keep reading the suttas.
That would be a little bit dangerous, though, but maybe an audiobook.
That's also fine. As for a while heavily medicated, I mean, ideally be less heavily medicated, that would be good. But if you only ever study suttas when you're in the perfect ideal state of mind, then you will just never study suttas. So if you've had surgery and you're on heavy duty anesthetics and you're lying in a hospital bed and you're like, well, but I can't study suttas because I'm on medication. No, take the opportunity, study suttas. Even if you're having a hard time understanding it on a conscious level, you're still putting the Buddha's words into your mind, and your mind will still gain some benefit from that. So I actually don't believe that there's a wrong state of mind for studying suttas, for reading suttas, for listening to suttas. It's always fine.
That's really especially if there's one thing about different reasons why people are in bed, and so if you're sick and in bed, maybe a wonderful time to read the suttas. Some of the teachings of them may come home much more deeply about the teachings of illness, for example. But it's just one possible example. So it wouldn't be anything disrespectful about that if you're sick and have to be in bed to study the Buddha's teachings.
Right, thank you. And it's 9 p.m., so maybe we can do Zen answers to finish all the
Or
thing.
they can ask their questions next week. because there's still quite a number of questions left.
Actually, not that many. No. They're very short. Who arranged the suttas into the Nikayas?
We don't know. We only know that it happened hundreds of years after the Buddha.
Perfect. Witness Protection asks, do you think enlightenment is impermanent as a fleeting moment in life?
No.
No.
It's irreversible.
Karen says, I read a book by Pema Chodron and it really had an effect on me. I have always labeled myself as agnostic. How does someone pursue Buddhism further? By going to a Buddhist monastery. That's the best way. So just search whichever Buddhist monastery is closer to you and go to it. We highly recommend Theravada monasteries of the forest, but there are also other monasteries too. And okay, perfect. That's all. See?
Oh, I thought there were more. Okay.
All right, wonderful. Okay, we have come to the end of our monk chat. Thank you so much for all your good questions, and thank you to the Venerables for all your great answers. And we will see you next week. All right, may you all be well, happy, and peaceful, and may all good things come to you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.